Welcome to the Laws of Style, featuring conversations on creativity, fashion, and the law from the leading edge of our economy and culture. Hosted by noted fashion lawyer, Douglas Hand.
Hello, and welcome to the Laws of Style. I'm your host, Douglas Hand, fashion lawyer and fashion law professor. And for this episode, I'm joined by designer, milliner, and local craft activist, Gigi Burris. Gigi, thank you for joining us today.
Doug, thank you so much for having me. I have hoped that you would ask me on this podcast. So this is a real treat to be able to sit down with you today.
Of course. Well, let's start with early days in terms of your education. You are a proud Parsons alumni. And I wonder, with hat making, what is the coursework at Parsons or any other design school, and how early do you need to make that decision that you are going to focus on that accessory?
So, I attended Parsons School of Design, the new school, and when I went, the location was still in Midtown in the Garment Center. So I loved being able to pop into the shops in between classes, and much has changed. They've moved the location away from the Garment Center, and now it's much more niche. But when I was there, pretty much if you wanted to study fashion, you were there to study ready-to-wear. And the coursework was primarily focused on ready-to-wear. And it was my junior year that I was accepted into the study abroad program at Parsons Paris that I really fell in love with the curriculum that they were teaching, which was much more hands-on craft, really old world sort of methodology. And we learned about textile development and treatments and working with our hands. And so when I came back, later that junior year, because I went for one term, I took a millinery course at Parsons, and it was the first millinery course that Parsons had offered while I had been there. And there wasn't a lot of interest in the class. And I believe that you had to have 5 students to, make up a class that they felt, they wouldn't cancel. They felt like there was enough interest in. So I asked a friend, I said, please, will you take this class with me? He took the class with me, and we were very
intimate. Get curriculum quorum, I guess.
Yes, and it was an intimate environment, and I went on to apprentice and sort of intern for that teacher.
Well, so shortly after graduation, and I think after either interning or working with that same professor, you launched your line, you launched your eponymous brand, you launched your business. And I wonder, just back to the educational aspect of things, how prepared for that were you? Were there courses at Parsons that prepared you to be an entrepreneur and small business owner, or were there not?
Luckily, there were not, because I feel like if there had been, I wouldn't be here today, because there's just so much I think that you need to learn, particularly being a New York-based business, as you know. There's some more legalities to actually becoming a real business. And so I actually took a course at FIT.
A business-oriented course at FIT?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's great to hear.
Yes. So, after receiving a BFA from Parsons and, working freelance for several years on, just hustling and trying to do this on the side, when I decided to become a full-time brand, I had a showroom in Europe that would sort of wholesale the collection. So they took care of that business side of it. And then I really wanted to learn how to become an actual business. And so there was a course after work at FIT that I took that really spoke about, the foundations of building a brand and building a business.
Well, important components. I mean, ones that don't always find their way into the design curriculum, don't always find their way into the MBA curriculum, meaning a design and brand driven business, having an MBA myself, there weren't a lot of courses geared towards that either. But in terms of the real raw elements of getting the hats out there and other accessories, I don't want to limit you to hats by any stretch of the imagination. But what is your production methodology?
So, in terms of getting the hats from like an idea to my onto the shelves at Neiman Marcus, it's actually a pretty short path. So a couple things really, I've been very blessed. And one of the many things that has allowed me to become a real business is that this is a niche market. We don't have a lot of competition, both in the production and in the sort of like shelf space.
Okay.
So, there are very few places to actually manufacture hats, very few people that manufacture hats. And I'm very blessed that I'm able to partner with one of the few manufacturers that is left in the country. And so we have a very short path from idea to the shelf. And so we work to, sort of work with carpenters to carve blocks in the shape of the hats that we want for each season. We'll repeat shapes, we'll use vintage blocks. And for those that don't know the production methodology of hats, ours are made the old-fashioned way, which is the centuries-old technique of blocking by hand. So this is the same way it's been done for hundreds of years: steam, rope, and carved wood. So I guess the biggest investment from idea to production would be carving the wood, but we don't necessarily do that every season. Maybe we introduce one new shape a season. And then it's all done here in New York City, which is really important to me. But it also was important to me as a young business owner because local production lowered the barrier for entry for a small brand. I could start, making 10 hats, 2 hats, and now we're doing much more volume than that. But that sort of local production really allowed me to grow as a business in an organic and sustainable way.
Well, that leads so nicely to what my next question should be, because you and I, full disclosure, are on the founding board of Closely Crafted, really your brainchild. And you are our wonderful chairperson. But let's talk about local production, and maybe the best way to get into that conversation is, what is Closely Crafted, a new 501c3 nonprofit? What is its mission?
Well, I would just like to quickly shout you down, Doug, because you were one of the first people I emailed with this idea, and your dedication to quality and small business, you were right there with me in building this special project that we're excited to announce into the world. And so it's a nonprofit dedicated to preserving and sustaining American craft. And, it's one thing to be an American designer. It's one thing to be an American brand. It's a very different thing to be an American brand that makes in America. As a consumer, people have the choice of where their food comes from and where their, purchases come from. And it should be the same in luxury fashion, where they're sowing seeds into people here in America, continuing tradition, continuing legacy of creation here. And so what Closely Crafted really aims to do is excite and educate consumers about locally crafted goods, and then to support that excitement with industry conversations and apprenticeship programs that really capture this sort of gap in workforce training, where we have people that are in their 60s and 70s that are about to exit the workforce. And what we really want to do is take their decades of expertise and apply that and share that with those who are seeking employment, in a creative field, that this, convince them this is a cool and viable industry, and also give them, some really special skills to keep this legacy alive.
Well, and you mentioned the benefit to your own brand, a benefit that really all startup brands would share, that of not having to have, and I pardon the interruption of the sweet summer rain, as we're in midsummer. We've got one of those days where it's actually pouring outside here in New York. But the benefit of being able to do small orders and not have these gargantuan orders that candidly also lead to a lot of wastefulness in the industry. So pivoting a little bit, I know Closely Crafted is about craft, but some of the ancillary benefits to the industry as a whole, the fashion industry, which is a relatively dirty and rough business when it comes to labor practices as well as just environmental impact. That's all well documented, and I won't belabor the point on that to give people facts, which you can listen to any of the other podcasts to go through a lot of the numbers. But how does local production help alleviate those two pain points?
Well, I think it really addresses both of them pretty head on. So one is just production agility. So instead of having to commit to 50 hats of every color and every size, I can do 3 to 5. And then when I see, okay, everyone's obsessed with winter white, in November, I have to make more winter white. I'm right there fulfilling, not quite as an as ordered basis, but nearly. So our production is really focused on inventory mitigation and making sure that we don't overproduce. So at the end of the season, we're not on sale. We're not trying to offload, products that just were amiss for some reason. Maybe we misjudged a trend, or maybe, the weather was in such a way that it got warm too early or whatever. So foremost, inventory mitigation, then you're not overproducing. And then carbon footprint, you have production agility that one, you can react fast, but also you can react without having to factor in freight costs, freight time, and the carbon footprint of moving product around. With that being said, I think we're far past the point, unfortunately, in America, but it is still a viable part of the conversation that goods and production are being made here in America. A lot of times locally made is still of imported goods, but at least the carbon footprint is only on the goods as opposed to shipping goods from Italy to China, then back to Italy, and then back to the United States. So the carbon footprint is significantly lowered when your production is local.
Yeah. Well, and on the more labor facing and regulatory side, at least with production in the US, it's easier for you to put boots on the ground and see the conditions that labor is operating under. And candidly, with no disrespect meant to other nations that produce, but the laws in the US are labor friendly as they should be, and protect workers in ways that, say, the laws in Bangladesh don't. Not to mention how difficult it would be to go and check on your workers or the workers that are doing your work if you happen to be producing, so far afield. Well, how your business, and given that you are an advocate of local production and the businesses as well, have you as a business, putting the nonprofit aside, which is obviously a separate legal entity, has your business considered B Corp certification?
So, millinery, like I said, is a very niche industry, which has really allowed me to have, maybe not the loudest voice, but a pretty loud voice in my field, which I feel very grateful for. But it is very niche. And so I think that sometimes with certifications, there has to be precedent in materials. And we use such specific materials to the millinery industry that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding there has to be like some certain certifications in place, and our material is just so niche that no one has invested in a sort of grading system for eco-consciousness.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, some industry associations have, some of them are aligned with the cotton industry, some of them are aligned with wool. It's very difficult in this age of greenwashing to know that the little certification standard and the green, literally the green, label that it's put on actually means anything, which is a bit of a conundrum to consumers, right? I think a lot of consumers want to know, and I do think we are seeing movements, the Threat Act, activity in California on regulating the industry. The common outcry is that will simply make US brands cost more. Which does kind of lead to another element of at least ecological sustainability, but labor practices are the same. A lot of consumers may bemoan the fact that they are made to feel bad if they're buying fast fashion because they're being ecologically and socially irresponsible. How do you respond to those claims?
I think that luxury is not democratic. When you buy from just the easiest example is a hat from me, you're buying people's time, you're buying quality materials, but I mean, it's expensive. And so I would never want to shame anyone that they didn't have the means or, weren't in a certain class of financial, stability that they couldn't purchase this, and then maybe fast fashion is all they can afford. What we would want to do is, instead of shaming anyone, I think it's all about flipping the script and saying, hey, when you buy one hat that's such a beautiful quality piece, or one beautifully tailored jacket, over time you will get so much more value of that piece because it will last longer and it will wear better than you buying 10 fast fashion pieces. And that's where I think places like The Real and Vestiaire Collective can really, Dora Maar, they can really allow democratize sometimes this more like luxury fashion space through reselling. Because, I think that fast fashion, while it is about overconsumption, a lot of times that's what people are able to spend.
Absolutely. And it's a common complaint that I hear. What one other solution, you've been generous with one of my other nonprofit organizations, Goodwill, to help donate in terms of upcycled garments, and certainly the secondhand economy of garments is another way to sustain quality, possibly at an affordable price point. But you're right. It's about what is a fundamental right of the consumer, and perhaps changing a mindset. So the CFDA, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, we both have many friends there. A beloved organization comprised of the design community. What role do you think they have in this conversation about craft and local production?
I have been very blessed to be a CFDA member now for 5 years. And so I was, part of for those that wouldn't know in the audience, I was part of the Vogue Fashion Fund, the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, early on in the brand. And it really changed the whole trajectory of my business and allowed me to, interact with people like Anna Wintour and, Ken Downing, who put us in Neiman Marcus. And so, I have such a heart for the CFDA, and Cal McNeil over there has such a heart for local production. And so I do believe that they're trying to expand the conversation outside of New York City. And, where we really hope to partner with the CFDA is they have a banging production directory. It's such a great resource for those that are looking to expand into local production. They've really done an excellent job in curating it so that people can understand capabilities and minimums. But, the CFDA is a very large organization now. I believe over 500 designers that they represent. And so a small portion of those designers are actually crafting here in America. So, the CFDA has a lot of designers to represent. A good portion of those designers do produce overseas. So they are, tackling issues like tariffs and freight and backup. And, what we really aim to do is have a hyper curated conversation about local production, so that, it just shines I think like a brighter spotlight on that issue, which I know is very close to the CFDA, and we hope to work closely with them. But, they have a lot to do. And so we're hoping to sort of magnify this particular cause while working alongside them.
Yeah, it undoubtedly is a challenge when you have such a breadth. The fashion industry in the United States is massive, as it is globally. And so you have interests that you are representing, not all aligned on this particular issue, for sure. Well, let's talk about the fashion industry. I mean, so many consider it to be so glamorous, and often it is. But what are some of your more surreal and perhaps unglamorous moments? And what are some of your daily frustrations as you approach your brand and design?
Wow. Well, I guess I would lead you with the glamorous moments that we had a really special opportunity within the past year to dress Dr. Biden to meet the Pope at the Vatican, which was so special. And we had about a week to do it, which is a long lead time for those that don't realize that fashion is glamorous as it may be, is always very last minute. So
I'm just trying to think of how you compete with the Pope hat.
I agree.
That is massive, and I guess, for centuries, majestic, right?
Well, and so many head coverings have religious purposes. So what we made for her is called a mantilla, and it is traditional to wear, and to cover your head. And like multiple first ladies, any first lady that has met the Pope wears a version of this. And so we had a week to make it, and Anna from my team was like running to the train station to deliver it, to go down to DC. And so I guess while you guys as an audience see these amazing glamorous moments, what's going on behind the scenes is very rushed. And local production really does help me in the sense that I can facilitate things quickly. And I think what is a particular frustration for us as a brand is we're often the last thing someone thinks of. Someone's fully dressed, they have their sponsored jewels, they're ready to go, and they're like, should we add a head covering? Should we add like a headband or a hat or a veil? And it'll be the night before the Met Gala, and we're running it up to the hotel, at 6 o'clock at night. Or it will be the last thing that they take off. Like, oh, we really want a veil. It's going to be so great. Let's totally make this top hat. And then they'll be like, it's too much. I think let's take it off. So hair accessories and hats, I think, are one of those things that just are very last minute. And you never really know if your grand red carpet moment that you've prepared for is going to happen.
I never do. Well, let's talk, headwear and style. Let's start generally, and then I do want to focus on men, because I think that perhaps is more of a challenge. There is obvious functionality in most headwear, the hat in particular. But how can hats enhance personal style?
I think that hats are so memorable. They really define an outfit. I mean, you can truly make a regular, simple ensemble a statement making look if you just simply add a hat, the right hat. And, for us, we really work with women and men and people of all, genders and ages and shapes. And they come into our studio and we work with them to make sure that whatever they leave with, they feel confident. And confidence and style and hat wearing really just go hand in hand. That if you don't feel confident in your hat, it will wear you. But if you feel confident in your hat, it will really give you the presence to sort of command a room.
Yeah, I think that's the issue for men. What would you say? How would you couch that to the man who, look, most American men, they have an obsession with the baseball cap, right? Which is, to me, infantilizing. I wear a baseball cap when I'm playing catch or, when I'm driving my truck or whatever, but, it's got a limited purpose for me. But I think most American men, that is their go-to. If they consider hat wearing, that's what they wear. So how do you get that guy to wear the fedora?
I need to see you in a baseball hat, Doug. I don't know that I would recognize you.
Right. But I played baseball in college. Like, I love baseball, but I'm not the guy who, you find American men wearing baseball caps inside.
Yeah.
You find American men wearing baseball caps backwards, taking any functionality that it has and just, unless you're avoiding burning the back of your neck to burn your face. So how do you get those men? Is it through a functionality argument and or style argument that you get them to see beyond that as the sole headgear?
Well, I think that as a broad audience, people across all genders have naturally gravitated towards more of a casual vibe. So, even outside of the headwear space, you don't have people wearing tailoring, people wearing dresses. You have a much more relaxed look. And so with that, it's very akin to something like a baseball hat, something like a beanie. And so where we have really found success with men is a hat that sort of resembles beanie vocabulary. And it's a brimless hat with a cuff, and it has like a sort of pinched crown, which is actually a fedora crown, but the whole vibe has these beanie vibes. And Mahershala Ali wore it to the Oscars. He wore it on the cover of the Hollywood Reporter, and then like rappers like Skepta and Black Thought started wearing this hat. And we have had a real sort of, kind of fire building around this hat. It's called the Sharina. We have a dedicated area to it on our website because I think it's not a crazy diversion from this casual vocabulary of a beanie. So that's where we've really been able to speak to a broader audience than maybe some of the, women who are wearing a brimmed hat, is this hat called the Sharina.
Well, and so for our listeners who aren't watching and haven't seen the images we've been able to throw up, when you say beanie, what do you mean? Can you describe it?
So it's not a brimmed hat. It has a cuff, about a 2-inch cuff that sort of looks like a rolled beanie. And then the top has a pinch. It's a tapered top, and it has a pinch. So it almost looks like a beanie that when people make their beanies like stand up with a bit of stiffness, not like a Scully beanie, but like a beanie with volume.
And does it come from any particular, I believe I've seen that hat in certain countries. Does it come from any particular background?
There's so many different cultures that have a hat similar to that. And so I also think there's some familiarity with that vocabulary. Our intention was more of a beanie, but, I think that sometimes when people are fearful of a brimmed fedora, which can be quite specific and really flattering for the right person, there's more of a neutrality with something like that.
Got it. Now, we've been through a couple of years of the pandemic, and many people are still partially going into offices or not, and many people are working from home. Have you seen a commercial transition with respect to hats? Obviously, you're not wearing hats usually in the office, but you're wearing them perhaps to the office in your travel time. Have sales gone up? Have sales gone down? Are they neutral? And what do you see for the future?
So, while the pandemic was very difficult for us, particularly with some of our retail partners, what was great is everyone was outside. And so they needed hats because they were all having like full on outdoor activities was the social norm. Lunch was outside, dinners were outside, everything was outside. So we saw quite a peak in straw. And I think there's been a loyalty from those people that maybe wouldn't have invested in a hat, but they were spending so much time outside to protect their face, or, summer hats, straw hats. They really do have a setting outside. So it's been great. I think that is a trend that's continued. A lot of outdoor activities, outdoor wedding sort of focused occasions. So that's been awesome. I think where we took the heaviest hit was occasion wear. We had developed quite a bit of party sort of New Year's Eve veilings, leading up to last holiday season, and Omicron sort of flattened anybody's Christmas plans.
Right.
So the pandemic absolutely has little microcurrents within my niche industry. But overall, I think that people have made a decision to invest in small businesses and invest in stories and invest in women-owned businesses, small businesses. And so that's been a good trend for us across the board throughout the pandemic.
Well, and what is your ruling on hats indoors? When is it appropriate to wear the hat indoors? When should it be taken off? And does that modulate depending upon the hat?
Well, I think it really just depends on how good your hair looks underneath. Because when I have a hat on, there's a reason, because whatever's going on underneath is probably not great. Well, also the reason is that I make hats and I'm always wearing them. But I do think, aside from church, you're okay to wear a hat inside. I think, when the national anthem, sometimes people choose to take their hats off then. Services, whether that's a church or a funeral service, there's certain moments that respect is often shown by taking off your hat.
Yeah. Well, how about personal style inspirations for you? And this can be outside of the hat. I assume it is. You are an incredibly stylish person from the head down. So who, men or women, living or passed away, have inspired you?
I guess people that inspire me that maybe necessarily wouldn't inspire my own personal style is seeing, people tag us on Instagram. As social media has kind of developed, as the brand developed, we get more user generated tags. So I am always really excited to see how people style the hats, and it's particularly cool to see, be surprised by something that maybe I wouldn't wear it that way. So I guess that's what's really inspiring. And then for me, it's sort of old school. I love references for my own personal style, from the 60s, from the 70s, I guess the 1890s, a little bit goth, a little bit feminine. So
Gigi, any names come to mind of iconic?
No, I guess that means I'm a real individual, that I can't think of anyone that I would emulate their style. But no, sorry.
That's fine. Well, how about this as kind of a hackneyed but always interesting response? The difference for you between fashion and style, what is it?
So I think style, again, comes down to confidence. It's about really knowing yourself, and knowing what looks good, what makes you feel good, whether that looks good on you or not. So I guess I feel blessed that maybe I don't have any references, because mine's just very reactive, maybe from references like movies or things. And then fashion, I think, is about feeling current and feeling on trend, or being really new and bringing freshness into the conversation, I guess, would be the difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think, could be tweaked, because I think that with fashion comes a lot of in season and out of season, which leads back to a sort of waste conversation versus style, which is more investment pieces.
True. Well, and recently, over the last decade, at least in the traditional fashion cycle and commercial cycle, we've seen not so much a bifurcated men's fashion and women's fashion. We have seen kind of a unisex offering, or women kind of moving over to tailored clothing and perhaps even buying from a menswear designer designs that were intended for men, and vice versa.
Totally.
With the hat, that must be sort of easier to see, and there's less sort of pure signifiers of some gender intended element with what you make. But what are your thoughts on that? And do you have, hats that you feel are purely for men, purely for women, or are they all fluid?
I think we're well past that. Hopefully, I know that we are here. Not to say that there's anything wrong for people that don't have that kind of fluidity, but we no longer have men's on the website, because I just think it's limiting. Not that it's just limiting. And I think that whatever makes people feel good, they should absolutely wear. And we kind of have sizing across the board. At one point, we were offering men's and women's specifically from a sizing perspective because there is a difference in general head size trends, but now we're pretty much across the website. I do think we advise if you're a man or a woman, this is maybe where you would sit. Typically for a medium, if you didn't really know your size, but we just offer extra small through extra large so that we could accommodate as many people as possible.
Well, are there brands that, whether it's from a design perspective or back to craft from a locally sourced and use of local craft perspective, that's a mouthful, that you admire or inspire you in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think, it's one thing, I guess, to be inspired for personal style. It's one thing to just be inspired by people and what they're doing and like the gorgeous aesthetic that they've established for themselves. And I think that, some of the brands that we have, involved in Closely Crafted are just doing incredible things. Brandon Maxwell has really been a force of New York and crafts things here that are so stunning and so impeccably made and, catered to different body types. And you have Maxwell from Maxwell Osborne and his new project, An Only Child, which is all from dead stock materials. And there's a ton of gender fluidity in his clothing and in his accessories. And we had the opportunity to collaborate on a hat together. And then you have Alexandra O'Neill from Markarian, who's doing just the most gorgeous, structured and beautiful dresses with gorgeous and lively prints. And, I wouldn't call these brands colleagues, but I would, I guess, call them colleagues in a way because we're all investing in local production. And, I'm really inspired by people that are building businesses and doing it thoughtfully and beautifully.
Well, maybe more on the industry. So collaborations. I mean, you can't swing a cowboy hat around and not, sort of have 5 or 6 new weekly collaborations sort of announced. You have had collaborations, but few. What is your view of how the collaboration stands, to inform on brand? And do you think that this moment where we tend to be somewhat awash in them is good or a little bit confusing for consumers?
I think it's like very case by case. Some of them I find to be like when large European houses go together, it just seems unusual to me because you've spent, decades trying to establish your own DNA and then you're going to like mix it up together and sort of I just think that when collaborations are organic and there's a mutual respect in both parties involved and there's enough DNA of both that is visible, but the product is new and fresh and something that the client really has never seen before is when they hit. And we have been, we often get asked to collaborate because we are in such a niche category. So people know, that we make hats. And so we're often asked to collaborate because it's often something that people don't produce in-house.
Influencers as sort of a related topic and, the economy of influencers and how important they have become to many brand stories. Really same question. How do you feel about the use of influencers? How do you use them yourself? And good, bad, or just downright confusing for consumers?
So, I do think that influencers have consumer touch points. And I think that the more consumer touch points that feel organic to your brand, the more audience that you build. For us, we never felt that influencers were something that were high on our priority list when it came to marketing. It just has to be, and we've tried, but it just really has to be organic. It has to be people that are excited about you. And some of our biggest advocates and biggest allies are celebrities and, bloggers and boldface names that love our product enough that they buy it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I've noticed that. I mean, you've got a real role of A-list celebrities that wear your hats. And as we've already discussed, I mean, hat wearing is not common, still not common. It's not, we're not in an era where everybody is wearing a hat. And it's a testament to that, but it's also a testament that they buy them as opposed to, they're gifted and they hashtag Gigi is awesome, or whatever it might be on Instagram.
Yeah, use code 10 at checkout. Use code Laws of Style at checkout.
Well, Gigi, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for coming in and enjoying this beautiful summer storm with me. Any last parting words before I let you go?
My last parting words is for those of you who have been wondering in the audio what the little rumbling noise is that my studio is in Two Bridges, and I'm in between the Manhattan and the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a very hip neighborhood of downtown Manhattan. But with it comes a natural cityscape noise. So I appreciate you bearing with me on that front too.
I knew what that noise was, and you and your husband, I mean, visiting you guys is such a treat and such a pleasure to see the way that you work and the environment that you work in. It is a lot of what Closely Crafted is about and supports. And so I think that is good context. I heard a lot of that and I knew exactly what it was. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And until next time, bye now.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Laws of Style with Douglas Hand. For more information, go to our website at www.hballp.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hand of the Law. Thank you for tuning in. And stay stylish.